Dan Roberts, welcome on to Searching for Mana.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for having me. So,
Yep.
Been invited over to Vegas. Anybody who's not watching the video, we're sat in a very luxurious suite in the Mandalay Bay at the ITC conference, where Dan and Nayms have a presence this week. So thanks so much for allowing us to film the Searching for Mana podcast.
You're welcome. Welcome to my abode.
It's a very nice abode. Not so great coffee, but I'll take what I'm given this morning. Dan, if you could introduce to the audience, really in some type of elevator, what Nayms are, what they do.
Sure. So Nayms is building a digital insurance marketplace. We use Web3 technology to bring the transfer of value and information into one environment. So we're aiming to provide flexible digital infrastructure for insurance players to build digital carriers. And what that means is using smart contracts to act as an on-chain balance sheet where an insurance manager can raise funds, can track ownership over individual investor investments, and can work with a network of participants to write risk against that balance sheet all on chain within a legal framework and a regulatory framework that is suitable for this new technology.
So this is definitely one of the coolest things that I've heard at this InsurTech conference this week going on, really in the innovative part of the insurance sector. Be great to also understand some context about the company. So, some metrics. When was it founded? How many people are you now? You've got VC backing, so if you could just talk us through some of that, please.
Yeah, so we're around 3.5 years in. Started from some research that I was doing with a fund called InsurTech Gateway, that's one of our lead investors. And the research was very much on two things. One, how could we scale insurance capacity for digital asset risk as a new risk category? The space was $150 billion at the time, largely uninsured, is still largely uninsured today. And the hypothesis was if the space continued to grow, then traditional insurance capacity wouldn't be able to scale to provide the volumes required in covering these all sorts of different types of risks that were coming from this new space of digital assets.
On that point, why would that be the case? Why would you assume that they wouldn't be able to cover it?
A few reasons. The main one being that if you're using a dollar-denominated balance sheet to cover crypto risk that's denominated in Bitcoin or Ether and a plethora of other assets, then that mismatch between assets and liabilities would force you to factor FX into your pricing when pricing the risk, making it very expensive. And your cover wouldn't be able to expand and contract along with your liability. So not only would that make products very expensive for insurance, but your capital would be inefficiently allocated, either over or under exposed at any given time. Inefficiently priced at the beginning, because you have the FX risk to price in, but then instantly could go either way based on what your liability was doing against the dollar. So we wanted to create a native environment to the crypto space that allowed very much the same value chain in insurance to conduct its business, but in a crypto native way. And so that was the first piece, is how could we allow assets to match liabilities for crypto assets so insurance parties could come in, build an insurance program, all crypto native, for these new different areas of risk. And we don't, at the project level, do the individual pricing and the sort of business line selection, where that general marketplace piece for those parties to come in and do their business in this efficient way. And that leads into the second piece, was if we could create something that was efficient for digital assets, then could that be a step change in efficiency for the wider insurance space as well? As many people know, crypto assets also have this concept of stable coins that are pegged to a fiat currency, usually US dollar. And so you could build these insurance programs in a stable coin to cover dollar-denominated risk, and that could go beyond digital assets into catastrophe, travel, health, parametric insurance, a whole world of insurtech perils. And so that was our goal. Step one, go to market. Digital asset risk needs a native environment to allow insurance protection to scale. But almost more excitingly, how could there be a new innovation for the traditional insurance market, which there hasn't been a step change in the way that structures over the last 350 years. It's been a process of slow iteration and a slow evolution, and the internet has given rise to a whole burst of energy from the insurtech space, and we think it's time that those parties have back-end infrastructure that's just as digital as they are.
Amazing. So if we just come up to date now, if you just talk us through, I know a number of people are geographically distributed.
Right.
At Nayms. You have a base in Bermuda due to some reinsurance regulation, or that's how I understand it. So just talk us through properly the scope and scale of where Nayms is today.
Sure. So we've raised $8.5 million of funding. Our team is 19. We're set to be 30 people by March 2023. So that's about 6-7 months off. So growing really nicely on that front. We're set to launch early in the new year. And yeah, that's right. We have a fully distributed team. I think there's about 3 of us in London, but really we're spread from Denver through to China and lots of places in between throughout Europe. Bermuda, we do have a presence. Our regulated business is over there. On the regulatory front, we can dive into a bit more, but we took a very pro-regulatory approach from the beginning, and so we're building a nice relationship on the island over there.
Yeah, I want to, in the final part where we future project, talk about how really some of the legals and regulation is where the innovation comes with Nayms, as you've put it to me previously. So we can come back to that. In terms of the team, I've got to meet some people in Vegas, and there's a really great vibe. I think that you clearly have done a great job in building a brilliant unit who are in sync at the moment. How has it been managing that through? Not only are the team distributed, there's been COVID in this founding innings of yours as well. I know that you do a lot of stuff through like virtual meetings,
right,
and like even play online games with each other. So talk us through some of that, team bonding and
Sure.
How you've managed to do that through this period of time.
Yeah, so we were fully remote from the beginning, so pre-COVID days, and I guess it comes with a great challenge as well as being the best part of my job and the culture within Nayms. So, on the challenge side, there are logistical issues and barriers in hiring people from all over the world, but less so time zone wise, which is the piece that people seem to get hung up on. The company, we try and keep a 4-hour window in the middle of the day where everyone is really overlapping, everyone across the whole business. And there are some adjustments to people's daily schedules to make that happen.
That's a really useful tip for anybody considering this or who hasn't done that yet. I just saw that companies are starting to hire people by time zones in
Right.
preference to geographies as well. So it's
Right.
interesting to see the evolution of how this will pan out. What are those, like specific toolkit here, what are those 4 hours that you guys have chosen?
It's like 1 to 5 UK
Yeah,
time.
okay.
So, we have people as far as West Coast who get up very early, and then others who, have a later time. But, if you're a remote business, I think, and lots of companies have found this through COVID, you can be very transactional on calls. And that's why we come to places like this to meet people and even meet up as a group.
Yeah.
And the benefit of that, although there's a relationship building piece that you miss, the benefit is that if you can keep incredibly productive within those 4 hours, it gives people the rest of their days to get things done. And we do have some people, our head of business development, for example, that have these busy schedules throughout the whole day, and it's difficult to find times to actually sit down and get work done. So it's a nice way to help people psychologically with when they can have focus time and when they can be collaborating. And as a remote business, that collaboration is as paramount as it gets.
Yeah, and we in Mana Lab did a study on distributed teams, and we set up a tool in Slack, which is called Moody Man.
Yep.
Where it was running sentiment analysis through teams when they've got different skill sets, and sometimes how the jargon can be confusing and can stress people when they're working remotely. We feel like it's an area to try and support teams who are distributed, because that clearly looks like it's one choice that certain organizations will take.
Right.
So it's like, on that specific point, you said, sometimes it can be quite transactional on a call, or potentially, on a Zoom you can't get eye contact. So there's some development in the metaverse that's coming for that. And when you're writing, I do it myself to the team, you can reread some of the lines that you've sent to somebody that's trying to be constructive, and it just comes across very transactional and productive.
Right.
Specifically so you've got the time zones, which has been worked out well. Specifically, what are you doing other than when you come to Vegas and you're doing team bonding? Like throughout a week, how are you managing that?
Well, I act like a goofball for the first 10 minutes of every call, so that just gets some fun into the room. We all have VR headsets, very very modern and millennial, and we use them for different reasons. We use them every week for work. It's funny you mentioned eye contact. I do talk about it as being actually a part of VR. Is quite interesting. There's two things that are different between a Zoom and an online sort of metaverse meeting. One is you can look at people in the eye. I know it sounds dumb. It's like an avatar eye, but you end up, you're moving your head, you're looking around to different people. And the second thing, which doesn't happen too often, but you can have multiple conversations within a single group. And so you can have a small conversation over there, and that's quieter for you because they're further away. And then you can, quickly ask someone next to you a question, and that is a different dynamic as well. On Zoom, it's always one person talking or presenting. So yeah, we do try and use that, and then in a fun way, we have these games that we can play online every month or so that people can opt into.
Yeah, I find if you go onto Zoom with more than say 3 or 4 people, I mean, it's annoying, isn't it? Because either you feel like you might be lecturing people, or someone else is doing it, and if you try and interject with a comment, it's really tricky. So you found that that's a great solution. And how many people can you get, on the metaverse around a table where it feels productive?
You can get 16. I think we've reached 15 maybe, or 12 or something like that. And then there's always a few people who've forgotten to charge up or whatever else that can come in a normal Zoom square. But I think to the Zoom call point, we don't have that benefit of being in an office, going out for lunch, grabbing people that you wouldn't usually directly work with on a day-to-day basis. So those micro conversations that you don't have throughout the day as a team, we're trying to figure out ways to just encourage that dynamic so that it's not like you're working with people that you don't know. And I think we do a great job. The best thing about Nayms is the team, hands down. But we don't shy away too much from having a larger group on calls, because it's important for people to hear what conversations are going on, what people are working on. Maybe there's a question that comes up where you wouldn't otherwise think of connecting specifically with people within the team for that purpose. So we don't sit all day as a big group of 12 on Zoom calls, but I don't mind there being some large discussions. And we've tried recently to really pull in a lot of the calls we were having throughout the week into a single day where everyone can get up to speed to free up people's time as well. So it's a constant evolution, really, and open for everyone in the team feeding back on how best to grow that.
Thanks. Before we go into the section about you, Dan, and go into some of your wonderful and mysterious past, I just want to finish on some of the current. So I feel the way that you've built the team has been brilliant. For someone who's raised VC backing, and from like a real kind of cornerstone lead investor, I'm sure you could have last year, we're in 2022, September, raised more money, hired more people. And then we've walked into, in 2022, a bear market. And so incredibly shrewd, the kind of approach that you took. But I remember having a conversation with you through it, and what really struck me, for quite a young founder, was how you were thinking of growing the team, like really from a value perspective, making sure that each hire was right, making sure you weren't over hiring, and that the team was, all productive and, caliber A in preference to let's just go big, let's go raise more money. I'd love you to talk to that a little bit, what the thinking there was, and given what's happening in the market condition, has that panned out to be the right move?
Yeah, the main piece is it's very difficult to be focused on fundamental analysis in a startup because it's a startup. You could be anything. It could end up being Google. It could crash and burn within 10 weeks. And when it comes to valuations, there's a million and one examples of the crazy stories that go on. And if they go badly, then the founders are vilified. And if it goes well, then they become these big heroes of our generation. And it can be reasonably easy when you get the right story and you sort of hook the venture market into this being the next big thing to raise large amounts of capital, particularly if capital is free flowing, which it certainly was last year. I think in general, it was always, I was chatting about this with a friend yesterday, it's very difficult for me anyway, because of my character perhaps, to go out for a fundraise with a story that I don't believe in. And it's your storytelling. It's this is the team, this is our business, this is our future. And if I don't believe that we're worth $1 billion, which right now is the case, then that's going to be difficult for me to go out and pretend. And you get 1,000,001 questions a day when you're fundraising. I don't want to be playing some character that believes in something that isn't true. And so it's always just about the story. If you can stay as close as you can to what you think is fundamentally the case, then you'll always be able to grow that over time. And there's going to be no surprises when you get to the next round, because you've been talking about what the company should look and feel like in the next round when you get there. And then suddenly you can go in and say, 18 months ago, this is what we were talking about, and now we're here and we're ready to do another funding round. So, I won't claim to have had this, magical ball that said, well, the market's going to crash and we're going to want to have raised a small amount and then continue to grow as our actual value grows. But right now, that's kind of what it looks like, and all for taking the credit for that.
So we'll go into your bio and understand more about that character, which is really interesting in terms of then how your decision making has panned out with raising and building the team. Mm-hmm. Final question, just about the present, like coming up to it. Right now, what's the biggest challenge to take the next step?
As I alluded to, my favorite part of my job is that team dynamic. And, I can talk about challenges on the sort of business proposition side, which I will do so. But I think there's a really deep level of nuance to what makes a good team work. And, I often say to the guys that, there's two things that we're building. One is Nayms, marketplace, proposition, all of that. The other side is just the dynamic of a team that can solve problems. And really, we have unbelievable insurance-specific experts within the Nayms team. But I would have every confidence that if Nayms moved on, tomorrow, we could go and do something else completely outside of insurance and work through that process. That's really all, startups are about, is running through a space, figuring out these challenges and what's going wrong. And these incredible solutions come from that, and it doesn't have to be specific to any vertical. So that's the challenge, I think, is working with people like Mana, working with the core team to figure out how we work better together and
so
grow.
I think in parallel to that, I love that sentiment, but in parallel to that, you could have the same team focused on different industry sectors and trying to achieve different things. So, there's this classic, well, is it about a great founder or a great team, or is it about a great market opportunity? And it's
right.
it's in the middle. It's when you can bring those things together. Mm-hmm. So the opportunity you guys are going after, I certainly believe is epic. Mm-hmm. Relatively sure that there will be somebody who will take the market opportunity. And so what comes into it is the timing, which tends to be affected about, is the market ready, A, and B, the technology, and then the team that comes to it. So looks like you guys have assembled a phenomenal team. The opportunity's there. What's the challenge to get from 0 to 1? Because I think from 1 upward, then you're in a wonderful position.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Technically, what is the biggest thing that you need to achieve to bring that marketplace together? Like the first transaction, for instance, what are you looking at as that 0 to 1 moment?
Yeah, so, we say that there are lots of crypto people that don't understand insurance and lots of insurance people that don't understand crypto. And so the challenge is this educational balance in the middle, where we're in constant conversations with one side of the market in talking about the other side and vice versa. And so that challenge is A, in that education, but B, is in really the technology itself should fade into, not insignificance, but should fade into the background.
Yeah.
What they're trying to do is the end goal for them, what's their value. And that doesn't have to be around this narrative of blockchain, smart contracts, immutability, tokenization, how legal and regulatory pieces fit in with this new sort of method through the tech. But at the moment, that is the way that we speak about what we do, because people want to know the details with these new businesses. So yeah, our 0 to 1 moment will be when we're talking about the end proposition for them without the technology piece being a part of educational need for users.
And the user case there, because I'm just trying to think, if I'm in the audience here, do I completely understand everything you're trying to achieve right now? And I think to finish that piece is to understand a user case.
Yeah.
So, I just think probably my number one fan on the podcast is my mum. She's quite knowledgeable about fintech now. So you can,
right, yeah.
you can speak at like 7.5 out of 10. Like, what's the experience she ends up with this all goes right in 2 or 3 years?
So an insurance company can build a digital version of themselves on our technology. So it's a separate balance sheet or account for that company to operate their business, their book of business, which is a pool of capital on to which they can write risk. They can obviously raise those funds from capital markets, but the center of this whole marketplace is this on-chain balance sheet. And yeah, that moment where an insurance company wants to raise funds from an alternative capital source, we give that regulated bridge to that source, and then can work with brokers, etc., on distributing risk and writing that against that pool of capital. That's the moment where we get to 1.
Yep.
And the challenge is, do we work with the big guys, the big insurance players, who have innovation departments, they have lots of resources, they have lots of bureaucracy, or do we work with the small insurtechs who are maybe more in tune with what the technology can do and are more flexible to work with them, but have fewer resources? They're startups of them, in their own right, so they have their own startup challenges that, and their own focus that takes up their time. So finding that key player to get to 1 is the biggest challenge. And exactly as you say, once we get there, then we have less of a time restriction on the different players coming in. We can work with the small guys to help them through that application and setup process, and we have the time for the big guys to go through the compliance and due diligence that's required to understand the technology, own a wallet, this sort of crypto piece that allows them to hold funds and transact on chain. So yeah, pulling it all together is a major piece. And before we go live, the main challenge has been not just in users, but pulling these regulatory, legal, technical, and then obviously commercial pieces all together. And that, as a startup with limited resources, becomes the main orchestration challenge. But like you say, we've got these amazing people who work at Nayms now who have made that such a more powerful process. And when you say it's somewhere in between people and proposition, it's really both. I didn't know what Nayms was going to become when this started, and that's because these incredible teammates have come in, have been given the autonomy to do what they can do, and have surprised me beyond anything that I would have realized to begin with. So yeah, very excited to get to 1, basically.
Yeah, amazing. We'll cut back into some of that in the final part. So I'm going to just read out a few things, for what I think anybody would find from a conventional LinkedIn or CV, so that you can't just do a kind of time walk through your obvious background, so that we can go into some of the stuff like you don't drink coffee and tea, which I find really weird. This is the interesting stuff.
It's as interesting as it gets.
Well, we'll find out. So, A, maths, economics, music at school, A levels. That's good. That's strong academically.
Love it.
Top notch. University, Bristol.
Yep.
Economics.
That's right.
2-1.
A low 2-1.
Started to have a bit too much fun potentially, and then like after that, founded a few different types of company. Banana Berry.
Yep.
Okay, want to go into that?
My first love.
Lacuna.
Lacuna.
How you pronounce it? Lacuna Digital and Lacuna Health.
Yeah.
And then it really goes into like from jellyfish into blockchain interest, which we'll come back onto. So I think that's the CV. Now let's go as far back as possible and really try and help us, if you could be so kind, to visualize, what growing up as Dan was as early back as possible, thinking from a lens of what potential like influences you had early on were.
Yeah, where to start? I mean, so I had a good foundation as a kid growing up. So I had the freedom to explore sport, explore music, and those two things, tennis and saxophone in particular, became my first jobs. So teaching tennis, teaching saxophone, and I think that, as you talk about with my achievements at school, there was a kind of a bubble that I was existing in, which was you're surrounded by a very small community of people that, constantly are sort of affirming the achievements that you're doing, and that makes you, feel great. You go into university, your world expands only slightly, but you feel like it expands entirely. And you end up, a little middle of the field, realizing slowly that you're probably on a bit of a path that's just getting you into the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And so as good as, our school was in encouraging these kind of extracurricular activities and things, it was really, its main purpose was to get you into university, and then university you realize is kind of all geared to the grad job, and the grad job, is geared to get you into the world of work, and that's the...
So just before we get to kind of the university onward part.
Yeah.
So it's a good school in terms of like churning out good grades to get you into the right university. What might it have lacked then? Like if you looked back, was there anything that it could have facilitated in terms of like a philosophy or a thought that it didn't?
I think school is, and the purpose of school, it's very difficult for them to allow individuals to follow a general direction that they might be very good at. That's tough when you're, governing 5,000 students. And so, in a way, what they did well was do as much as they can to allow you to pursue these other non-academic interests. But really, I think it becomes the role of the parent to keep you wise to the fact that school is only going to be limited in that regard. And I think I had that. I mean, both my parents were doctors. I maybe initially thought that their intention for me was, be a doctor or be a lawyer kind of mentality, but that wasn't the case. And so school, I don't have any reservations about, but you do realize as you grow old that, I'm like 32. But as you grow up, that there's a limitation in what they can do to opening your mind to the things that you can do in life. There's not 5 jobs. You can create your own, or you can choose from any of them.
Do you feel that you had anything that might be toward an outlier experience? So both the parents are doctors, so I assume the experience is like they're incredibly busy, right? They're doing really impactful, purposeful work. You're going to a good school, getting good grades, you become really good at some sports as well. So everything, like you say, is just, you must be highly capable, disciplined, doing really well. Is there anything outside of that Which shows why you're, I mean, if you look now, you're a disruptive entrepreneur in like an incredibly innovative space. And I know part of that story probably comes from university onwards, but like if you go back, was there anything that would demonstrate perhaps some of those tendencies? The classic being, you know, the person selling lemonade out the front of the porch because they're
Yeah.
a mini entrepreneur or whatever it might be.
I don't know. I think, I don't know if this is an outlier thing, but we really just spent a lot of time in the natural environment. You know, I'm a guy of the mountains. We camped a lot. My dad sailed. You know, that's a lot of where we spent our time. You know, close family, not city folks or anything like that. So, yeah, I know there's like a need for this sort of entrepreneurial, you know, story, but it really was just a, you know, connected, peaceful.
Well, there's a few
piece.
trends that I pick up on when trying to find, I know I have to keep pushing at this point,
Yeah.
But it's interesting if we find something, which that might be, you know, like the founder of Rocket Internet believes that most of the greatest entrepreneurs were born on farms. He literally looks for this because he thinks that you get to this position of being able to dream so big that when you then get to the city or you start your venture, you won't let go of that huge dream. Like the conditioning isn't there.
Right.
And so actually, you know, there's many different models that could make you an outlier. That could be one. If you think back to, you know, when you were in those type of environments, you're out in the wilderness, was there an ambition to get away from this and get to a city and to set something up?
No,
No.
That wasn't. But I think the point is there was this foundational life, if you like, of enjoying, you know, pursuits, sport, whatever else. You know, that hit me when I got to university. I know you're trying to keep me at like, you know,
age
3
8.
years old, and you know what happened as a child. But I think the conditioning, if you want to call it, throughout your childhood, is only learned when you get to an older age and something hits you. There's like a, you know, there's no conflict in the way that you think and the way that you live as a kid. That was my experience. And then when you get to university and you start applying for a financial job, there's a major conflict. Like you are out of alignment for the first time in your life. And you can either, you know, not think about that and, you know, maybe you get the job. And I got an interview at Barclays Capital or whatever it was, and I didn't get the job. And I remember being so relieved that I didn't get the job, which was a strange thing. It's like, I'm going for this job, I put in all this time, because that's what I've been told at university I'm meant to be doing. And when I didn't get the job, there was suddenly this like relief that I could go back to living in alignment. And so, you know, whether that was going to be entrepreneurship or anything else, there was a moment coming out of university where I realized that I suddenly didn't have to go for this job that I had maybe subconsciously been, you know, heading towards for a long time. And that was incredibly freeing. It's like, oh, I can live in my adult life in alignment as well. And so, yeah, you know, I'm not a psychologist, so I probably couldn't break down the childhood piece as well as you're maybe hoping, but I think that's probably it, is you're able to exist in a world of experience, if that doesn't sound too pretentious. You know, I'm less about knowledge and more about this experience. And as soon as you're like pulled out of that experience to kind of be someone else, you know, put the suit on and, you know, go and get the grad job, you know, there's a real pulling out of that, you know, it becomes very apparent. And so there was this realization of like, oh, I can go and do whatever, you know, like don't worry about what other people may be thinking for you. They're probably not thinking about it that much at all anyway.
Yeah, and I think probably 95% of people don't have that realization or head into that, you know, Barclays Capital role, and that can be a great thing because, you know, serendipitously you might enjoy it, you might garner experience from it, and then decide to do something else. But really early on, you have this kind of cognizant, you know, moment where you're liberated to choose what you want to do. And then what happens next? How do you go through the next phase?
Well, just a quick thing to pick up on is that So yes, I'm sure some people enjoy that sort of thing, but there are lots of people that talk about starting companies, because a company can be anything. It can be a sport thing, it can be yoga classes, it can be artist who is setting up exhibitions. It doesn't have to be like fintech, or anything else. So it's so broad that it can be anything, and everyone that you speak to has a thing that they love doing that can be a business, non-profit, big venture scale, whatever. And it's crazy how these types of financial jobs, and I just say that as an example because that was the route that I was potentially going to take, they're so good at keeping you in for the rest of your life. It's like the moment that some of my friends reach peak, I'm going to start this business, the next time I see them, it's like, I got this promotion, I got this, and it's like, so there's like this subtle knowing of how to keep people through an entire career, that by the time they get to the end, it's a little cliche as a story now, but I'm always wary of things that become, over-argued points, kind of like social media is bad. It's like, but we still use it because it's become so well known as an argument. And it's the same with these kinds of jobs. It's like there is so many cool things that people could be doing, they get roped in there. So what comes next in terms of doing it? Well, it was the 24th of January 2014. It was a Friday. I was bored. I was doing logos and thinking about starting a project. This is Banana Berry. I was treasurer of Bristol Social Enterprise at university, so I was always interested in social enterprise as a model that could be applied across lots of different verticals. I never had a love for a specific vertical, but this was in food waste, creating products from food or potential food waste. I went on Company's House, £15, registered the company. I was a CEO. That was nice and easy, straight to the top. That was just something that came alive in me, that no one was looking at what I was doing, and I had just done it. And it sounds like such a tiny thing, but it felt already that I was kind of back on track. Instantly told, all my closest friends and family that I was the CEO of this company, and it didn't even exist. It was just this, registration. But kicked that off for 18 months and, absolutely loved it. Very artisan, connected with my sister who has a financial background and, really supported me in these early days. And that was it. I was hooked. I was going to run things that I was interested in with cool people that I respected for the rest of my life, and the rest is history.
Thanks. So the point you're making about people can do so many cool things, and if you go into one of these corporate roles, they're so good at taking you up the ladder gradually. Like, absolutely, that's for sure right. I think there's a quote from Benjamin Franklin saying that, and obviously this is a quote from a long time ago, most men basically die at 25, because at that point, any clear ambition has basically gone. They're on the corporate, kind of treadmill. But should everybody go and start something? I mean,
yes.
No, for sure not, right?
Why not?
Well, I think it depends, like, at what scale somebody's going to go and try and do something. So you've set up a bunch of ventures, I've set up a bunch of ventures, and I don't think everybody's going to want to do some of the elements that make you focus on finance, running a business, payroll, regulation, like the grind of setting up a self-sufficient, proper business. Certainly from my perspective, and talking to friends, looking at other people's experience, is monumentally tricky, unless you, like you say, align it with exactly where your sweet spot is. And I don't think a lot of people find that straight away. So I think if you have, if you know where, you kind of get energy instead of losing it. And for you, that comes from, social enterprises. So actually it don't particularly matter what sector it is in, but I want to go do this. I don't want to work in this corporate job. Then that's great, because then there's enough motivation to spend the year or the two, or even if it doesn't succeed, feel like there's been a good set of experience, maybe toolkits that you've learned from it. But I think for a lot of people that's not a great option straight away. Like there's timing to it, and I think for a lot of people it's not a good option to go set something up. I would say.
So yeah, setting something up is too prescriptive, as broad as that is. It's just about, there's a fear barrier, I think, to lots of people in terms of what they can do with their time, and that's the piece that I would maybe just encourage doesn't exist. You've kind of made it up for loads of different reasons. And there are, a total new world of different things that people can be doing with their time if they understand that. But it's a difficult one to encourage, because people are leaving stable things, and maybe part of them just kind of likes the conversation around would love to do this or that, and you talk about payroll and all these other bits. You don't want to spend, or I don't want to spend my whole day in some creative haze of entrepreneurship inspiration. Yeah, it's fun to have these things that tie us to getting things done and feeling productive. And
for you,
for me, right?
But
so
so in the day job, having interviewed thousands and thousands of candidates over the years and going into their drivers, I don't think that there's a segment of people who would be motivated enough to properly set up their own business. And by that I talk about whatever it might be. It could be a cafe, it could be something online, it could be a big business.
Right.
And then I think that there's, you can kind of get in a bubble around where you are if you consider the people you work around previously or at Nayms. These are highly able, competent people who could all probably set their own business up, no doubt about it, if they wanted to do it. So I think the prescription, this happened in work recently as well a lot because of venture backing, where there's this frenzy about, I want to be in a venture-backed business and go be a founder. I don't think that's good advice. I'm not saying that's what you're saying at all. And I think that happened in venture as well. It's like, well, look, if you should get venture. Venture is fit for purpose if you want to be this outlier business that's going to be monumentally big. Then that's why it's been geared, right? But there's a bunch of other financial asset classes you can go and raise from: private equity, high net worth individuals, or you can organically run a profitable business. And then that's a whole different model. And so I really, through the show, want to kind of interview enough different type of entrepreneurs so people can see that there's many different options if you're compelled to go do that.
That's right.
But there's another option, which is work can be brilliant where you're also not the person who set it up.
That's it. I'm sort of joking, but with the sort of everyone should go and start something. It's not about starting something. It is just about, you have a thing that's in your mind that's pulling you in a direction, and usually it's got nothing to do with a startup, company, any of that. It's about some flow state thing that is, I want to write more, I want to paint more, I want to ski more, I want to run, or whatever it is, and that can always be something that can become a larger part of your life.
Yes.
And that's the bit for me, is people say, or you think about how many hours people work, and let's just take the cliche, you're in the office, you're working 7 till midnight every day, and you're knackered. You're tired not because you're doing loads of hours, but all of those hours are effort. But if you can find something that there's a naivety to it as well, which I think has always been a good part of my character. Is just there should be a little healthy dose of naivety with these things. Is if you can try to dissolve this delusion that you can't spend more of your time doing the thing that you enjoy doing, that thing that's triggering in your mind on a regular basis. If you're out of alignment, there are all sorts of jobs that can support you financially to go and do that, and that can sometimes be as the founder of something. And again, that's so broad, profitable business, small non-profit, whatever, or it can be any other things. It's just about having people doing the thing that they're meant to be doing, and this is a sort of some major task that we're trying to achieve at Nayms, is that are people in the jobs and roles that they want to be doing, do they have the freedom to make decisions and be proactive and go and drive their own careers? It's not some top-down hierarchy of like, we need this done and you got to go do it. It's if you get the hiring piece right at the beginning, then it's crazy how much these people can achieve.
I love it. And sorry, I'm just being like contrarian on that point. Mana is set up, it's what is people's magic? What is their connection to the purpose of the companies we try and align them with? And a lot of the drive for me or anybody who's working on Mana is so many people are just not happy with the role that they have. And it's just wonderful when you do manage to get them into a position where they're really energized by the work they're doing.
Yeah.
But there are different levels, that rightly as you say, and I think in Web3, we'll see people having multiple projects. So like this onus of like, okay, I've got this one thing and everything comes from this, the financial house, career, credibility.
Right.
It's like, do I move this? It's like, well, okay, you're quite interested in this project. Perhaps you could spend some time on that, in the evening, on the weekend, or perhaps you might end up with 3 different projects that you're working with. And so I think Web3 is going to be really exciting to explore that over the next 7 years. So just before we go into the quick fire Mana round,
I love it.
I am looking forward to. A lot of what's come out of that has been this attitude to openness, Dan. And I wondered if there's something that you do around any rituals or meditation that gets you in the right type of state to have this kind of, what feels like real great ability to kind of in the moment make decisions from the right place.
Yeah, it's a big topic, I think. What allows you to be in a place of presence, really, I think is how I think about it. A boring one is routine is good. I get up very early and enjoy a good amount of exercise before I start work. That is a good start to a day. It is as basic as advice as it can get. But that's a major one that again allows you to do as many hours as whatever you're doing as you need to do, because
have you stuck to that whilst being in Vegas?
I have not. No. That's why I'm being incredibly unproductive. But yeah, I think if you can spend your day with that, there's not like a degradation in your productivity throughout the day, then that is a powerful thing. There are lots of different ways that people get into that state. Meditation is a very powerful one, not something that I would claim to know a lot about. But there are lots of tools for that, and these can be one-off experiences, psychedelics, breath work, etc., or they can be a daily ritual of exercise and whatever else it may be. I mean, again, I'm limited by my own experience, and so what seems to work for me is just having a clear mind and enjoying the variety in your job as well is something that I'm very grateful for. Working with lots of different people in lots of different areas just keeps excitement and focus in being able to make clear decisions as and when they're needed. This is a side thought, which it feels like there's an attitude where you have to have an opinion over something. And you see this in debates as well. It's like, how necessary is it for us to have to fight an opinion versus just having a discussion about what we do and don't know and coming to some mutual, okay, well, this makes more sense, and and so forth. So I find it interesting that sometimes, and I don't engage online much, social media and all that, but I think that has allowed me to not be so tied to opinions. And people can disagree with me, that's their opinion. But it feels like it's very rare that you actually need to have a strong opinion over something if you have a good dynamic with the people that you're working with. I have trust in the people around me are saying things, and that's coming from the right place. There's no, ulterior motive. That it's rare that you really need to force a decision through or an opinion through. And again, this is all about balance, so I don't want to sound vague, but you obviously need to have a general idea of how things should be going and the way that people, your worldview, incorporates how you think other people should sort of behave. But that's what's cool about companies, is you can build a culture within a company And that allows you to collaborate not just amongst each other, but with other companies. And if all companies are doing that, then that is what progresses culture, on a macro level. So yeah, there's a rambling in there, but I think the point is, being in a real state of presence, and I'm a big skier, that takes me right into that moment. Then you become very capable of connecting with like-minded people that are not so attached to their own preconceptions, but are open to discussions about how things should progress.
Yeah, thank you. I think once there's routine, but there's the ability to have flexibility and flow and creativity within it, you're in a really good zone.
Yeah, and remote working, to bring it back, is powerful for that. Some people hate working at home, but if the beginning of your day is, stood next to some stinky guy on the tube, and then you come out into the world, and that's a crazy way to start your day in my mind.
You're able to control that environment, aren't you?
That's right.
It depends on the commute, doesn't it? Because certain people have a run, meditate, but I think you can get that zone from anywhere. It could be, you've got a particular shower routine, or you've got to walk to the office. It just depends, whatever your habit is. Typically it being relatively consistent, super useful, and allowing creativity through it.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think that's definitely one of the benefits of remote work for a certain type of personality trait.
Yeah, we have, our world has done everything for us now. We have phones that can bring us food and, go on a date and, do all that instantly. And so that's the challenge. That's a big challenge, I think, for our generation. Well, my general view is to remove yourself from that as much as you can, so that you're in control of how you want to spend your day. And then these minor things that people who commute every day are like, whatever, it doesn't make a big difference. Actually, that does make a big difference to your feeling comfortable. And it's not about being in a state of comfort. It's this balance between, you should push yourself and go, into these slightly more chaotic states, or coming out to Vegas even is, there's all sorts of things going on, and we're shooting this, and there's a million people, and you're running all around all over the place. So it's not comfortable in the sense that other days might be when you're, waking up and you're working from home and having a nice day. But I think, you have to remove yourself from some of these negative patterns of routine to realize, this is a better way of doing things.
At Mana, we've got different type of natures of work. And so I've just completely said, look, it's hybrid. I think it's very useful for us to come in every now and again for whiteboard sessions or whatever.
I would love the ability to do that.
People also feel like they're more productive, or there's a variety of scenarios why they would prefer to work remotely. Right. What we've seen is different types of teams behaving differently based on what the nature of work is, and therefore potentially the characteristic of the person. So for sure, the sales team, even if we basically say don't come in, they'll come in.
Right.
And I mean, then we'd have to get really deep into the philosophy of whether that's good or not. But certainly it feels like the reason they like that is the energy they get from each other, and the bouncing around of what can be quite a high volume metric role. And so you just can't stop those guys coming in. They really love to do that. And then people who are more on the research or academic side certainly seem to sway towards being in their own zone. So I think my hope is, and this is definitely what we want to be the broker of, is not saying this is the right thing to do. That's the great thing, is you just really brilliantly put across. With companies, you get great cultures. They're very different. And we feel like our responsibility when we're introducing people to them is just being really clear with what is strong in that culture, and making sure that if a person loves that, that's great. But if they don't, then that's probably a reason, even if on the title and the money's great, don't go there. If you're somebody who's really strong on this point. So I think as it moves forward, you're going to have remote work, in-office work. You can see the investment banks bringing people back already, hybrid work. And it's just really important when you're looking for your career, many things, as you were saying, but also on that point to just make sure you're really clear about what the setup is, basically.
Yeah, me and Ted, my co-founder, we started the company 3.5 years ago. We didn't have an idea, we didn't think about culture at all. We just, you start and you get going, and then it becomes its own thing over time, and being a remote business is one of those things. We would love to be able to have the opportunity on a whim to get everyone into the office for a day or a week to work together. And we have these moments like Vegas, and we had our product offsite recently in London where people come from around the world. If we could teleport in for a day to all spend days together, we would absolutely do that more often. But because that's not possible, we could either hire all in a single environment, but then we wouldn't have the team that we do. So there is a trade-off, but I think there's huge benefits on that side, and we're very clear, as you say, through the process of what that culture now looks like, and we've lost people because of that. But that's a win for both sides, I think. Right.
So quick fire mana round. We're
Yep.
going to find Dan Roberts' mana and superpower.
Ready for it?
Answer these as short yes, no, or
Yep.
elaborate into them if you're really interested in the particular question. Dan, what would you put onto the front cover of your favorite publication? So think of I don't know what the insurtech for Forbes is, but you've got the
Right.
front cover. What would you put on it?
I'm not sure an insurtech publication is my favorite publication.
What's your favorite publication?
I respect The Economist a lot. I think
Okay,
I think it's a good one.
Let's go with that. Me too.
Yeah. What would I put on the front? Just a photo of my face looking super wise now. What would I put? I'm interested in this this kind of old insurance story of a bunch of industrial folks getting together in a room, in a cafe, and kind of figuring out what's become insurance today. And what excites me about the company is that there's that same kind of attitude. There is a bit of a feeling of a fresh start about what we're doing, instead of it being another iteration on top of what already exists. So, it would be great to work with some creative design agency on what the front cover would look like, but some almost like an image of an old coffee house and half of it sort of being wiped out, and you're just left with a smart contract line of code or something like that.
Ooh, I like it.
And it's there's a fresh new metaphorical coffee house that's being put together by a random group of people all over the world, and it's the beginning of the next 350 years.
Love it. Amazing. What keeps you up at night?
Jet lag. Generally sleep pretty well, but
If we were
I think a piece for me is that when you talk about this 0 to 1 thing,
yeah,
it's like not getting to 1 is more sort of weighing on my mind than not going from 1 to a gazillion. And so, there are so many people putting in a lot of work into what we're doing, and not having those people find some success in their innovation getting out into the world is kind of that weighs on your mind. You want that to, you want people to have their moment where there's a real, like, I did that moment, and then whatever happens after that, is up to fate or whatever you want to call it. But there's a real pressure, I think, to make the work that lots of people have done come to fruition, and for them to see it out in the world. Something on that theme. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. Really interesting your take on this, because actually you've given quite a contrarian view to social media, which I agree with, which is there is for sure downside, but there's also benefit, and I think it gets too strongly put into the it's all bad category. The massive topic, I think, moving forward is artificial intelligence. Would you consider artificial intelligence friend or foe?
Foe. Because we don't understand it. It's like it is. So I had I was listening to a Diogo podcast, and he mentioned the book Beginning of Infinity by David Deutsch, which is probably the one I bring up most in conversations. It's an incredibly
You just killed my next question.
aligning, but AI seems to be the beginning of this sporadical infinity. So he has a very optimistic view of the beginning of infinity. This idea of the limitless, almost universality of knowledge, and knowledge being defined as good explanations, or explanations that can hold up to increasing culture of criticism, self-criticism. And AI seems to come under the same bracket of the beginning of infinity as that definition, but with a totally and utterly unknown for us. And I would imagine that David Deutsch's view, not to put words in his mouth, is that he's optimistic because you never know what you can achieve, through human knowledge, that can lead to all sorts of incredible inventions for the survival of our civilization and finding new places to live and so forth. Whereas AI feels like it's in another category of just total unknown that could just put an end to that. He says a comet or a politician is very, very unlikely to end human civilization, which would be the end of that creative knowledge creation. Whereas AI, it's like, oh yeah, I don't know. But I've watched The Matrix a few times, so maybe I'm too deep.
Are we in a simulation?
Yeah, not the one projected through these kinds of films, but a version of them, yeah.
Thank you. Do you have a particular mantra that you love, like to tell the audience about or live by?
Do I have a mantra? Along the lines of no fear, I think. And fear is way more subtle than we think. So yeah, try to figure out ways to understand the various elements of fear in your life that are dictating the way that you are behaving towards other people, towards what you want to do with your time, towards that climb or hike or whatever it is or startup or musical instrument you wanted to start or whatever it is. I think we adjust our characters way too much based on fear, particularly of what other people think as well. I'm caught up in that. It's like, am I doing this because there's an element, there's sort of this ether of thought of what people are about, and I think that grips us more than we think.
I love it. I think one of the things that just makes kind of life not as good as it could be is stress. And a lot of that's from trying to think about other people's opinions. And if you can get like a strong grip on, what your thoughts on things are, but also still be open to listening, then you find yourself in a more balanced situation. So I personally, the big one for me is trying to be grateful like first thing in the morning, because like I'm in a really fortunate situation where there's loads of challenges, there's lots of opportunity, and it'd be very easy to go straight into where the problems are. It's like the nature of a lot of the work that I might do, and then have a really bad day where you're basically reacting to a bunch of stuff. So I like to like go into the day, be grateful I've got it, and then push positively. So for me, there's a few things I do, but there's this kind of random stone I got when I was traveling once that I've just stuck with, and I tend to have it in my pocket in the morning. That's like an affirmation for me, when I kind of like hold that, remember that I'm grateful. It like really sets my day up nicely.
Love it.
Very cliche. Do you have anything?
Then you get on the tube and
you get on the tube and it all gets messed up. Do you have anything that like sets you up to remember that on a daily basis?
No.
It's just ingrained.
Yeah, it's just the grateful thing is a good one. It's like I'm not going to get into the free will argument, but there is a very good argument of how really all the things that you're doing are linked to everything that you would have done, beforehand, and therefore everything coming up is based on that as well, that sort of force. And so all the way back to your birth and before that, and so it's like all that's left is just if things feel good, then be grateful for that, and whatever these little things throughout the day that you enjoy doing, whatever they are, just take in those little moments. Another nice way of thinking about it was people often think about the good things in life being the holiday coming up, and certainly when you start thinking of a car or whatever else, Whereas that's such a minor part of your whole time. So if you can get these little things right, you know, a relationship, you know, your little ritual holding a stone, yeah, that's every day that you're doing that.
Yeah.
I think that's a good start to set yourself
Michael,
up.
who's on the show from Chainalysis, just takes great pleasure in how he makes his coffees. Like, he really stretches that to a 20-minute process.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that, like you say, is you really look forward to it.
People do that in corporate jobs. You know, they go to the toilet for like an hour just to not be doing. You know,
Okay, just a couple more of this round. If you could be so kind to kind of recommend who, like, you think a dream guest to come on to Searching for Mana would be for you.
Yvonne Chouinard. I don't know if I've said that right, but he's the founder of Patagonia, and he wrote a book that I've almost finished called "Let My People Go Surfing." You know, total veteran, been in it for a long time. I have Patagonia gear. He has a life that I, you know, really relate to and love, and he just loved being outdoors and skiing and hiking and ice climbing and all these things. And he managed to build a business that is totally aligned with the way that he thinks and what he wants to see in the world. You know, I didn't grow up being like, I just want digital insurance marketplaces to, you know, but there are elements that you pull from these things. So, you know, he would be, and there's some recent news which I think has gone pretty viral of him transferring the whole company into these foundations and, you know, giving up his billionaire status and things. And you know, you might see that as a PR headline, and you read his book and it is totally, he's seen this, you know, for his whole life. He's seen how this has gone. And, you know, the traditional business consulting wisdom was kind of always trying to push him off track, and he had a real direction that he just very cleanly saw. And he talks a lot about the environment and Patagonia's impact on that. And it's like, we talk a lot about the environment in, you know, our generation and you know, currently in the media. You have to spend time in the environment to care about it properly. Otherwise, it's just a debate of, I heard this thing and I heard this thing and this makes sense. And, you know, he's someone that has seen the impact of drilling, you know, these pegs into a climbing wall, and then coming back the year later and the climbing wall route's ruined, or, you know, has been impacted by humans being there and humans' participation in that event. And it's like, you have to physically see the damage that you are doing in these moments of loving the beauty of nature, to then spend your whole life creating something which is as aligned as it can be with that. So yeah, go outdoors, you know, go camping, go for a walk, because it leads to these kinds of characters, and I think he would be a great person to listen to.
Amazing. I mean, I just love biographies, typically always trying to find the next one. So you've kind of covered what book I'm going to go get as well. I'll put that in the show notes. It sounds amazing.
Nice.
Maybe I could borrow yours, Kindle, or is it book?
Kindle.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry.
I'll get a hardback.
Yeah, he doesn't have a phone. I mean, he's like, I love that. I would love to not have a phone.
Sounds so cool. Well, I'll try and get him on. It's an ambitious
I wouldn't
one.
last a day, but yeah.
That'd be amazing. I mean, is there another book you'd like to recommend?
No, I'd reiterate the beginning of Infinity.
Yeah.
I think it is it cuts through a lot of the confusion of people's battle with science and spirituality and religion, and it just is a real force for just looking forwards, and it ties all of these different things together and allows you to understand them all in a different way. So that's a huge one. I think that's mega.
Yeah.
And then Let My People Go Surfing is a
amazing.
great reminder of the outdoors.
Thank you so much. So, Dan, what would you say your mana is? And just to go over it for you, or anyone in the audience who doesn't know, in gaming, mana is, you know, your magic. So you've got your power, your life, and then you've got your mana, which can be your super sword skills or being able to run quickly, jump high, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And I know you'll have many, but if you were to say, well, the main one is, what's your mana?
What's my mana?
Lloyd.
Yeah. I'm a bit of a joker. I was a joker at school. I'm a bit of a goof. You know, I have this. You know, I have a job to do, and you know, I love all of that work. But yeah, it's back to that point of those little pieces throughout the day that make life fun. I'm sort of pretty much an idiot most of the time, and that seems to be going all right for me. So, yeah, joking around, it makes it more fun to meet new people, and yeah, that always just comes back to you. So I'll take that.
He's gone for joking about. So we're going to make mana cards for all of
Joking about, I'm happy with it.
all of our guests, and
Ask Danielle and David and my colleagues. Maybe
that's
they have
what
a
they'll
different
say. They'll be like,
Yeah.
this guy's bringing
He's a
nothing apart from-"
genius, you know. He's like, you know, intellectually superior. No, it'll be that.
Banter, and like on the cards, we're going to put like how strong the mana is.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like you're saying you're 10 out of 10 on banter.
Well, you know, just being a goof. I'm up for that.
Being a goof.
Yeah.
Okay, love it. Amazing. So covered like the here and now, gone into your bio. I think that like what's running through it for me, like I said, is, I mean, if I was going to say what your mana is apart from goofing around, it seems like this amazing openness. So I might put that on there as well.
Nice.
Want your
I
cards-
disagree
want
with your
cards to be
mana.
as strong.
I'm going to do
This is a centralized mana card.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
through some way of whatever, you know, has happened throughout the past, I've ended up in this moment of feeling very present. You know, that can be in my manner, if you like. You know, I don't know how it's happened, but I feel right here all the time, every day, and that allows me to be a goof. So maybe that's a better.
Just like
better
Michael
way.
Jordan. That was
Just like Michael Jordan.
Just like
People
Michael Jordan.
often compare us. Yeah.
So we don't have much longer. I've taken a lot of your precious time, and you've got to go, I think, give a speech at the conference. So just to wrap up, really, wherever you want to take it, I mean, I'd like to just, over the next 5 minutes, let you talk to the future of Nayms and what you would hope to achieve. You know, if we went really Hollywood,
Yeah.
what's the outcome here? You can go as far into the future as you'd prefer.
Yeah, I mean, sort of I've alluded to it a few times, but the big one for me is I would love for Nayms, so we can talk about what the future of Nayms, the proposition looks like, but I would love for Nayms, the company, by being defined as a group of people, being a example of a good collaboration of people. On the company side, we have two halves. On one side, we have the Nayms marketplace, you know, placement of insurance programs, raising of capital, trading, etc. And then on the other side, we have this catalyzing token. And so the name token allows users of the marketplace side to buy into its success and to buy into decision making. So they, for example, through being a token holder, have governance over our discretionary fund, the Nayms discretionary fund, NDF we call it. And there's a lot of influence that discretionary fund can have, and we like the idea of there being this collaboration on an industry level, even between competitors. Like some collaborative attempts have happened in blockchain, we think this is a really neat one, because we're not starting on the collaboration piece, we're starting on the utility of a marketplace, and then allowing those in the marketplace to buy into various different types of activity. So, you know, that's a really exciting one long term for us. Is sure, over the next 12 months, you know, we're launching the platform, we're growing these programs, fully collateralized to begin with, moving to leverage. That's a big part of our governance framework. Launching the name token, you know, we've managed to get some very large insurance companies that have never held tokens before holding our token, and so that's a real, you know, positive, exciting sort of claim for us that we've managed to, you know, take these parties through that process. And you know, just on the topic, our token is the first token that lots of VCs have held as well. So we're sort of the first token that they've held, which is another thing that makes us proud. And so yeah, that Hollywood piece long term is really seeing the opening up of an insurance market and how do they work together as well as compete in a competitive environment, but collaboration is always part of that competition. So yeah, who knows? Sky's the limit, and we're about to launch and put it to test.